Hey, it's me, Maris, and it's Confessions of an Eclectic Healer, Episode 9. And today we're looking at a little exploration again into the past, that dark past, where you kind of get convoluted and discombobulated. Yeah, that's the word I want to use. Discombobulated in the midst of all this chaos and stressed out moments where you're not sure if you're waking or you're sleeping or you're up or you're down or you're here or you're there. You're just lost. Lost in a lot of chaos. So I had practiced some Santeria and had been working doing, what I'm going to call willy-nilly witchcraft. Doing spells here, spells there, spell for this, a spell for that. Had done this magical work and had ended up married, but very unhappy. He was very abusive and secretive, and ends up that he had his own dark skeletons in his dark current past and current being, and etc. And that's a totally different story, but I will reserve that probably for somebody else. But I'm in this relationship and we have these 3 kids, and my 3 kids are a little stressed out. And so on a daily basis, I'm constantly having to light a candle or do a covering, or do some kind of etchel, because we call them etchels. We don't call them spells. They're called etchels. They're works. Doing a little bit of work there. And it's really stressful. It's really stressful in that, because you really don't know if you're coming or going. It's often people will portray that once you start practicing ritual work or ritual magic and you break away from this the constraints of Christianity or of a different kind of faith, and you embrace this multifaceted, multi-level kind of atmosphere, that you realize it's really not that easy to do. It's very, very complicated, and you spend a lot of time chasing this dragon. You're always trying to get to this point. When you're working in magic and you're working on the dark side, you always want more. It ends up, I kind of equate it with alcohol or heroin or cocaine. And some people may even say cannabis, but I kind of disagree with that. But once you get used to this routine and you get used to that sense of power, you crave it all the time. You crave it all the time. You crave having that manipulative control over a situation or over a person. And you realize that you spend a lot of your time, and I'm going to call it like this, putting a band-aid over a gaping wound. Because if you're having to do magic, etchels, spells, whatever you want to call it, on a frequent basis in order to manage a situation, that situation is not yours to manage. It was not meant for you in the get-go. Why are you there? And I had to come to this point in my life and in my marriage that, why am I there? If I'm having to do magic on a daily basis to keep somebody around, why am I doing that? And that is a part of growth, is when you can sit down and look in the mirror and go, why are you making these choices that are totally not appropriate for you? Now, I wasn't to that point. I started Reiki in the early 90s and was working through Reiki from the early 90s on. And I was not at that point until the late 1990s that I realized that there was something a little different there. Now, in between, I had stopped practicing. I enrolled my kids in a Catholic school, and because of a better education. I wanted a better education. They were going to public education, public school. We lived on the southeast side of Oklahoma City at that time, and I was not down with the schools at all in the 1990s. We had a lot of problems going on. My kids would walk to school, and mind you, we're Latinos, you know, and people would, the kids would jump them and steal their shoes and things to that effect. So I wanted to get them into a private school system because I couldn't switch them out of the school where they were. So I enrolled them into a Catholic school, and that meant that I had to start going to church there. And so I started going to church there, and I actually, now mind you, I was a Catholic, so I even was teaching catechism. And I enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. And then poo hit the fan. Things started crumbling, really crumbling. Remind you, I'm not practicing magic anymore. I'm not practicing magic. I'm teaching catechism. Very involved in the Catholic Church. My kids are going to Catholic schools. You know, they're doing their thing. And all of a sudden, what happens is that our marriage finally falls apart. And the church is in the middle of it, too, mind you. All right, so our marriage is falling apart. He's having an affair. Um, I'm kind of trying to be oblivious to it. My kids are stressed out. At this point, I had received Reiki training, but had kind of left it off to the side and really wasn't working with it. And our whole life crumbled. Our whole life crumbled. We went from living in a, you know, fairly decent neighborhood to living in the straight up ghetto. My kids and I ended up living in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom townhouse, straight up ghetto. Yeah, barrio ghetto, whatever you want to call it. I've lived in those areas. So it's like when people want to talk about different things of urban life, I've lived there. So I'll be happy to have a discussion anytime. I've lived in communities where we are heavily, heavily populated with illegal immigrants. So you want to talk about illegal immigration, let's sit down and talk about it. I'll tell you about the pros and cons, but that's not what this is about. This is about my journey. And so in this confession here, so we're living in the ghetto. I've got a really pretty decent job. I'm working at an area hospital. I'm at this point, I'm what you call a trauma technician, and I'm digging what my job is and learning a lot of things. And I'm one of the few bilinguals in the department there, so we get to spend a lot of time within that community in the emergency room. I get introduced to gangs and all sorts of cool things. Yeah, very interesting, and I've got a kind of cool story I'll tell in just a little bit about a gang. So at this point, I have left the Catholic Church. I'm not really practicing anything. I am still a God girl. I stopped teaching catechism. They actually came to me and told me how I needed to go and do a wonderful confession and an act of contrition and etc., and have some counseling because I was out of grace with the church. And I'm standing there thinking, I'm the one that's the, you know, that was the dutiful wife going to church. He was the one cheating. But, you know, money buys a lot of stuff in the Catholic Church, and I was broke and he was not. So anyway, so I pretty much get excommunicated. Not really excommunicated, but, you know, they pretty much make it very uncomfortable for me, make it very uncomfortable for my children. And so we stop going to church there, and we kind of don't go to church at all. And we spend some time out of church. But in that time, I started practicing Reiki again, and practicing Reiki on myself, and it was really difficult. We had a couple of difficult years adjusting into things, and we had a lot of growth during that time. They were really dark years because I would waver in and out. I would waver in and out of paganism, and I wouldn't even say Christianity or in the light. I acknowledged God, I acknowledged Jesus, but I really wasn't practicing anything other than I was doing Reiki in order to heal, because I was a broken-hearted, broken-spirited person at this time. So I go to nursing school. You know, I've been a trauma technician for several years there. I go to nursing school. I become a nurse, and I go work in critical care. And I'll tell you, I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but I could do some Reiki. So I'm doing Reiki all of the time when I'm working up in ICU. All the time I've got Reiki flowing. And I do have a couple of people notice that during that time that I'm doing Reiki, that my patients just don't die. They didn't. My ICU patients did not die. I had DNRs, and my DNRs transitioned at their own choosing in their own time. But my patients that were what we would call a full code did not code on my shift. I started working with energy. I was really enjoying it and digging it and everything that it could do. And each time that I was allowing healing to go through me to get to my patient, I in turn was healing as well. So I do my tour of duty for a couple of years in ICU, and then I go and do a year or so, I think it was a little over a year, almost 2 years, in pediatric psych. And literally the first day I walk onto that unit, I think I'm going to die. I'm going to make a statement here. Not all psychiatric illnesses are really psychiatric. Some of them are nutritional. Some of them are actually psychiatric. And then many of them are spiritual issues. And in pediatric psychiatry, I believe that most of it is spiritual versus the next part being poor parenting, and then that last part being actually truly psychiatric. So I'm working in pediatric psych, and this is where I really start to see things being in the form, and I'm going to use this phrase, satanic. 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 It was very interesting. I'm doing Reiki on a daily basis. Because remember, I'm talking about this first day that I walk in to this unit, and it was a behavioral unit, and my population was ages 5 to 12. 5 to 12. It's a behavior unit. So we have our antisocials, the reactive attachment disorder, and every once in a while they'll throw an autistic kiddo in the mix. Not a sexual perpetrator, but children that had been sexually abused and were acting out sexual. So we had this very unusual mix. So it's like Jeffrey Dahmer in the breeding, or in the, the grooming stage. Your monarch kittens, your handlers, these kind of folks, this is what they're grooming, right? They're creating. And they're using pharmaceuticals on these kids too. And did you know that pharmaceuticals are all experimental in pediatrics? Pharmaceuticals are experimental in pediatrics. Yes. So on that first day, I walk in and literally there are kids crawling on a wall, coming over counters. The place is totally chaotic. Noon, N-U-N. Think of that clothing line by Celine Dion, New New New. The Celine Dion's New New New. That New 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 is a play on words. N-U-N, N-U-N, or New New New. New, N-U, is also a derivative of Nun, N-U-N, which is the Egyptian god of chaos. So New New New, say it 3 times and you've invoked it, right? It is invoking chaos. So these kids are in chaos. Chaos. And I don't do chaos. I do not do chaos at all. I am a peace, love, and harmony girl. So I start doing Reiki on the unit. We had over 50 holds a week. Therapeutic hold. So a child is acting out, cannot be redirected, becomes violent to self or others, and you have to place them into what they call a therapeutic hold. So I've got this unit that we're doing that's got 15 kids on the unit, and we're anywhere from 50 to 70 holds a week. That's a lot of work, a lot of paperwork. Maris does not like paperwork either, and we're really stressed out. I'm doing Reiki on a daily basis, and within 6 months, 7 months, there's a drastic drop in therapeutic holds. The kids are happier. They're doing better. We're using less intervention and more positive reinforcement. You know, we get some kids on the unit that are very, very dark. Very dark. There is one child that comes on the unit and likes to draw. And I'm standing over their shoulder, kind of just looking at what the kids are drawing. And this child has drawn a picture of this child, of the self, laying on a bed. And around that bed are demons, 7 demons. And this child tells me that these demons are people that are known to them. And they do bad things to children. And they label this child schizophrenic, and I do not believe in schizophrenia. Sigmund Freud wrote a paper, or actually wrote and preached on this several times, and it's been proven throughout the years in naturopathic studies that schizophrenia, depression, and anxiety were not truly mental health disorders, but nutritional disorders with extreme deficiencies in vitamin Bs. So you notice that pediatric foods, foods that are geared for kids, and they'll talk about them being vitamin enriched and fortified, really aren't that enriched and fortified. They're loaded with a bunch of garbage, fillers and chemicals and derivatives and sugars and glutens and garbage that pollute the system and start creating malfunction in the way that the central nervous system behaves. This is how they create an army of zombies. This is how they create chaos in the ranks. Because unhappy children grow up to be unhappy adults. But Reiki heals, I'm just saying that. So I'm doing Reiki on the unit, and the unit gets better. And then I have some personal tragedy that goes through, and I have to disengage from this because it's time for me to do some of my own healing. And in this time, other horrific things, and the only consistent thing, spiritually speaking, in my life right now is practicing Reiki. And I like to kind of remind folks that Reiki is not a religion. It's a practice. It's a self-care practice. It's a care for other people practice. It's a vibrational healing. It's getting in touch with what universal life force, chi, energy, vibration. You know, the stuff that Nikola Tesla talks about? Yeah. And it's real and it's there and you can manipulate it. And I'm using the term manipulate in a good medical kind of way, meaning to change and alter things for the better. Not the negative gaslighting manipulation, but the positive influence. And so it's really kind of this cool magical thing in essence, because you can't see it, you can feel it. And actually, if you start really working with energy, you can start to see it. So I'm at this point in my life that I'm lost. My dad has died. My kids are growing older. My daughter's going through a crisis, and Kuka kind of picks up and leaves and goes off to the military. And she goes through some of her own things there as well. And I go dark once again. So in our next episode, we'll talk about the next journey, working with the physician who called himself Satan 666. So I will catch up with you very soon. Thank you so much for listening. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us. Comment on our podcast page. Or you can reach out to us personally at getconnected287@gmail.com or by snail mail, Maris at Midnight, Sacred Space Studio, 8005 South I-35 Service Road, Suite 205, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 73149. Give yourself a little self-love, and don't forget to do a random act or two. Even if it's just giving somebody a smile, you might make their day so totally worthwhile. Peace, love, and harmony. Do good things.